For the longest time, we pictured our genetic code as this giant, messy attic, just full of old evolutionary junk and, gibberish. But what if that attic is where all the treasure is hidden? Let's dig in and find out. Okay, check this out. 98%. That's the number that kicked this whole mystery off. For most of modern biology, scientists seriously believed that a whopping 98% of our DNA did absolutely nothing. They saw it as this huge biological desert, with just these tiny little oases of our genes scattered around.
So that leads to the big question, right? Is almost all of your DNA totally useless junk? I mean, this has been one of the longest-running puzzles in biology. It doesn't really make sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Why would we haul around all this extra baggage for millions of years if it was completely worthless? Something just wasn't adding up.
All right, so let's get into what they called it. The term junk DNA, and yeah, that's the actual scientific term they used, was coined back in 1972. The whole idea was that any part of our genome that doesn't directly build a protein, well, it must just be an evolutionary leftover. A ghost in the machine.
But then, everything started to change. In 2003, this absolutely massive project got underway, and it was designed to question everything we thought we knew. We're talking a huge international team of scientists launching a project called ENCODE. And their mission? To figure out what all this so-called junk was really up to.
And this quote from Eric Lander, who was a big deal in the original Human Genome Project, just nails it. He said, "The Human Genome Project was like getting a picture of Earth from space. ENCODE is like Google Maps." It's such a perfect analogy because it wasn't about changing the map itself, but about finally understanding what everything on it meant.
And this really breaks it down for you. The Human Genome Project, that was about just getting the letters, right? A, C, T, G, the raw code. But ENCODE, that was like getting the street view, the traffic data, the business listings. It showed us how to actually read the map and see where all the action was happening.
And the results? Wow, they were absolutely stunning. ENCODE discovered that at least 80% of our DNA is biochemically active. It wasn't a desert at all. It was more like a bustling city. And just like that, the whole junk DNA theory was completely turned on its head.
Okay, so if it's not junk, then what in the world is it doing? Well, the first big piece of the puzzle is that this massive part of our genome is basically the master control panel for everything else.
It turns out that hidden inside all this non-coding DNA, scientists found more than 4 million genetic switches. Think about that number. 4 million tiny little segments of DNA that are constantly telling our genes what to do, when to do it, and how loud to do it.
And the best way to picture these switches is to think of a dimmer on a light. They don't just flick a gene on or off like a simple switch. No, they can fine-tune its activity. They can turn it way up or dial it way down with incredible precision. And that is how a single cell with the exact same genetic blueprint knows how to become a brain cell instead of a skin cell.
But hold on, because this is where the story takes a really wild turn. The origin of a lot of these genetic switches, well, it's something straight out of science fiction. It's a secret that's been hiding in our DNA for millions and millions of years.
So get ready for this, because it's a real game changer. The story starts with this pretty shocking realization. These super important genetic switches, they're not entirely, human.
Yeah, so the scientific name for them is transposable elements, but they have a cooler nickname, jumping genes. And that's because they can literally move around our genome. And here's the crazy part. They make up nearly half of our entire DNA.
And here it is, the big twist. A huge number of these jumping genes are actually the fossilized remains of ancient retroviruses. We're talking about viruses that infected our primate ancestors millions of years ago.
It's incredible, right? Our genome didn't just fight off these ancient viral invaders. It captured them, disarmed them, and then repurposed their DNA for our own use. Nature literally turned an ancient enemy into a critical part of our cellular operating system.
So what does all this ancient viral code mean for us today? Well, it turns out it's absolutely central to our health, because when these genetic switches start to malfunction, the consequences can be really serious.
So what researchers have figured out is that for a whole host of complex diseases, things like multiple sclerosis, lupus, even cancer and diabetes, the genetic problem often isn't in the genes themselves. Nope. It's usually tiny little changes in these non-coding switches that just throw the whole system out of whack. So how do these switches get flipped one way or another? That's where this amazing field called epigenetics comes in. You can think of epigenetics as the software that runs on our genetic hardware. It's the study of how our environment and our choices can actually put little chemical marks on our DNA that control those switches.
The easiest way to think about these epigenetic marks is like bookmarks or sticky notes you put in a book. They don't change the words on the page. Your DNA sequence stays the same, but they tell the cell which pages to read and which ones to skip. This is the perfect explanation for why identical twins who have the exact same DNA can end up so different. Their different life experiences literally put different sticky notes on their genomes, leading them to develop different diseases.
So where does all this leave us?
Well, we've gone from seeing our genome as this dusty old instruction manual to something way more profound. We are literally on the edge of a brand new genetic frontier.
And the new way of thinking is this. Our genome isn't some static blueprint that's set in stone. It's a living, breathing, dynamic system of information. It's constantly listening to signals from the world around us and adapting. And that's so-called junk DNA. That's where most of that incredibly complex conversation is taking place.
And you know, the thinking just keeps evolving. Some scientists have even started using a new term, spam DNA. And I love this because it captures the idea that maybe this DNA didn't have a purpose when it first showed up. But kind of like spam in your inbox, it just hangs around. And over millions of years, the genome can go through that spam folder and pull out useful bits and pieces for new functions. It's not trash to be thrown away. It's a storage closet of potential innovation.
And that brings us to one last really big thought. The greatest biological mystery of the past half-century, all this junk DNA, turned out to be a hidden treasure chest. So it really makes you wonder, right? What other huge secrets about who we are and where we come from are still just hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to finally take a closer look?